There are moments in the history of the Catholic Church when a fundamental truth is rediscovered with such intensity and clarity that it completely transforms the life of a saint, and through him, transforms the understanding of countless souls. For St. John Bosco, a dedicated educator of youth, one of these extraordinary moments occurred when he was privileged to witness something that few people can fully comprehend: the direct and personal intervention of the Virgin Mary protecting and saving the souls of his students. It was not merely a theoretical devotion he had learned in his years of religious formation. It was a lived reality, a mystical experience that would reveal to him the central role Mary plays in the economy of salvation. During his years as a priest and educator in Turin, St. John Bosco had developed an extraordinary reputation for possessing a particular charism: the ability to reach the hearts of the most difficult young people, those whom society had rejected, those who seemed irremediably lost to crime and sin. His teaching methods were revolutionary for the time. Instead of harsh punishments and public humiliation, he used reason, kindness, and above all, genuine love. His students felt truly loved, truly understood, truly valued as human beings created in the image of God. But St. John Bosco also possessed something that transcended his ordinary teaching methods. He had an extraordinary devotion to the Virgin Mary that completely influenced his life and work. It was not a superficial or merely traditional devotion. It was something that came from the depths of his heart, something that constantly moved him to invoke Mary's protection over his students. He prayed the Rosary with an intensity that impressed his companions. He frequently paused in contemplation before images of Mary, and he often spoke of the Virgin as if he knew her personally, as if he had direct communication with her. His fellow friars began to notice that Don Bosco frequently described extraordinary dreams in which he saw the Virgin Mary clearly and distinctly. These were not merely ordinary dreams that dissipated upon waking. They were experiences that seemed absolutely real, that left lasting impressions on his soul, that often contained specific messages for his students or guidance on his educational work. And among all these dreams and visions, there was one in particular that would profoundly mark him and completely shape his understanding of Marian intercession. One night, while resting after a particularly exhausting day dedicated to tending to his students, St. John Bosco was taken in spirit to a place that transcended the natural. He found himself in a celestial atmosphere, in a reality that seemed simultaneously material and immaterial. And there he contemplated something that filled his heart with admiration and profound gratitude. He saw the Virgin Mary in her celestial glory, surrounded by radiant light and indescribable beauty. But the Mother of God was not simply in passive contemplation. She was active, she was working. She was constantly intervening in earthly reality for the benefit of souls. If you understand that there is a spiritual reality where celestial beings constantly work for the salvation of our souls, if you truly wish to understand the extraordinary power of Marian intercession, subscribe to our channel now. Your subscriptions allow us to continue sharing the truths that the saints experienced and that continue to transform lives. Press the subscribe button, activate notifications, and join us on this journey of deep understanding about Mary's role in our salvation. The world needs to rediscover authentic Marian devotion. May the Virgin Mary intercede for us all. In his vision, St. John Bosco could observe how Mary was literally protecting his students in a continuous and personal way. It wasn't generic or universal protection. It was specific, targeted, personalized protection for each young man who had placed his life under Don Bosco's care. He saw how for every temptation one of his students faced, Mary was there offering grace, whispering words of comfort, presenting a way of escape. For each young man who was close to falling into grave sin, Mary appeared invisibly to ordinary human eyes, but absolutely real to those who had the capacity to see the spiritual world and prevented him from committing the act that would condemn him. What impressed Don Bosco most was understanding that the Virgin Mary had an absolutely complete and personal knowledge of each of her students. She knew their names. She knew their particular struggles, their specific temptations, their points of greatest vulnerability. And for each one, she had a particular plan of protection and salvation. There was no student who was insignificant to Mary. There was no young person who went unnoticed by the loving gaze of the Mother of God. The vision also revealed that Mary was constantly in communication with the guardian angels of each student. There was an invisible network of celestial protection that enveloped the entire educational institution that Don Bosco had founded. The guardian angels received direct guidance from the Virgin Mary on how to protect and guide each young person toward salvation. It was as if Mary were the supreme general of an invisible army, whose sole mission was to save the souls of the young people she had placed in her hands. Don Bosco also clearly saw that Mary had a particular interest in education as an instrument of salvation. She understood that youth were particularly vulnerable, particularly exposed to sin, particularly at risk of losing faith and divine grace, and therefore she had dedicated her special intercession to this work of Christian education. She was present in every classroom through her invisible influence. She was guiding every word Don Bosco spoke, every piece of advice he offered, every demonstration of love he expressed. All this was facilitated and amplified by Mary's intercessory action. The vision also showed specific moments where Mary's intervention had been particularly crucial. Don Bosco saw one of his students who was on the brink of moral ruin, who was about to completely abandon his faith, who was tormented by temptations that seemed irresistible. And he saw how Mary appeared to this young man, not in a way that would frighten him or make him doubt his own sanity, but in such a delicate and loving way that the young man simply understood that he was loved, that he was cared for, that he had infinite value in the eyes of God through the intercession of the Heavenly Mother. Another moment that deeply marked Don Bosco in the vision was when he saw Mary protecting one of his students from a particularly insidious temptation. A young man was about to become involved with companions who would lead him into grave sin. His will was weakened. His resolutions were being tested, and at that critical moment Mary intervened. Not through a dramatic manifestation, but through a series of small events that seemed like coincidences, but which were in fact deliberate acts of divine providence. The young man casually met Don Bosco that day. A conversation arose, a word of guidance was spoken, and the young man was saved from falling. The most touching aspect of the vision was when Don Bosco understood that Mary was so dedicated to the salvation of her students that she frequently offered her own merits and her own prayers on their behalf. The Mother of God, who could have been in perpetual contemplation of divine glory, was instead constantly interceding, constantly praying, constantly working for the salvation of young souls living on the streets of Turin, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. Like a mother who would dedicate anything for the salvation of her children. When the vision ended, Don Bosco awoke with his heart completely transformed. He understood in that instant with a clarity that no theological argument could provide. Devotion to the Virgin Mary was not optional or secondary in the Christian life. It was central. It was essential. It was the key to understanding how God works to save souls, particularly the souls of young people who are most vulnerable. From that day forward, the life of St. John Bosco was completely oriented around Marian devotion, not in a way that overshadowed the role of Christ as the only Redeemer, but in a way that placed Mary in her rightful place. As the supreme intercessor, as the Mother of the living, as the one through whom the grace of Christ flows to souls seeking salvation, Don Bosco began to structure his entire pedagogy around Mary. He taught his students to constantly invoke Mary's protection. He recommended the daily recitation of the Rosary not as an optional practice, but as something absolutely essential. He created an organization he called the Association of the Immaculate, where his students explicitly consecrated themselves to the protection of the Virgin Mary. And he frequently told his students, "Mary is your true mother. You can trust her with everything. She will take care of you better than anyone on earth." The language Don Bosco used changed after this vision. He frequently referred to the Virgin Mary as if he had a personal relationship with her, as if he spoke to her regularly about each student. He would say things like, "I asked Mary to take special care of you," or The Virgin Mary has a particular plan for your life. For those who heard him speak in this way, it became clear that Don Bosco was talking about something that went far beyond theoretical devotion. He was talking about a living reality, a personal relationship with the Mother of God that directly affected his daily work. The impact of Don Bosco's vision on Marian intercession extended far beyond his own life. It profoundly influenced how he trained his successors and how he structured his religious congregation. He created a spirituality where Marian devotion was absolutely central. The Salesians, the members of the order that Don Bosco founded, were taught to live under Mary's protection, to trust in her intercession, and to constantly invoke her help. One of the most remarkable practical consequences was that Don Bosco developed an extraordinary understanding that miracles in the lives of his students often came through Marian intercession. When a particularly difficult young man was transformed, when a student who seemed hopelessly lost returned to the path of virtue, Don Bosco did not credit it merely to his own pedagogical efforts or personal influence. He credited it to Mary. He often said, "This is the work of Mary. I was only the instrument." Don Bosco also developed a profound understanding that Marian protection does not mean that temptations disappear or that students do not face difficulties. It means that in genuine spiritual struggle, Mary is there offering grace, offering strength, offering the knowledge that they are not alone. Marian protection is the protection of a mother who allows her children to grow through struggle, but who sustains and guides them through every challenge. In the last years of his life, Don Bosco frequently returned to the memory of that extraordinary vision as a source of consolation and guidance. When faced with moments of discouragement about the future of his work, he remembered what he had seen. Mary caring for her students, protecting them, interceding for them, and that memory strengthened him to continue his mission even when external circumstances seemed unfavorable. One of the most touching characteristics of St. John Bosco was his tendency to describe personal experiences as if they were stories he had heard from others. He often told stories about students whose lives were transformed, but he implied or sometimes explicitly stated that he had learned of these stories through a Marian revelation. For those who understood his spiritual charism, it became clear that Don Bosco was describing the realities he had seen in his vision of souls being protected by Mary. The fundamental teaching that Don Bosco derived from his vision was that no young person is lost as long as Mary is interceding. That no matter how difficult the situation, no matter how hardened the heart may seem, Mary is always there with a plan of salvation. That genuine Christian education is not merely the transmission of knowledge, but is creating an environment where Marian protection can act, where young people are constantly invited to trust in Mary, where the grace of Christ flows through the intercession of the Mother. Don Bosco often emphasized to his students that they didn't need to be extraordinary or special to receive Mary's protection. She dedicated herself to everyone equally, to the most intelligent and the slowest, to the most virtuous and the most prone to sin, to the rich and the poor. All were her children. All were the object of her maternal love, and all could count on her continuous intercession. Don Bosco's vision also led him to understand that the role of a Christian educator is secondary to the role of Mary. The educator can plant the seeds, can offer advice, can demonstrate love. But it is Mary who truly cultivates these seeds, who truly guides the soul of the young person, who truly protects them from evil. Therefore, Don Bosco taught that the educator should constantly invoke Mary's help, asking her to complete what the educator cannot do. In the years following his vision, Don Bosco developed specific practices through which his students could more effectively invoke Mary's protection. He recommended that everyone recite the Rosary daily. He encouraged the frequent reception of the sacraments, particularly confession and communion, as a way of remaining open to the grace that Mary could channel to them. He established special feasts in honor of Mary, where the entire community explicitly consecrated itself to her protection. One of the stories that Don Bosco frequently told illustrates the type of Marian intervention he had seen in his vision. He described a young man who was about to commit a serious crime, who was under the influence of criminal companions, who seemed utterly lost. But then, At the last moment, something happened. A sudden illness kept him off the streets, or a chance encounter separated him from his companions, or a word from Don Bosco's mouth awakened him to reality. Don Bosco attributed all these coincidences to Mary's action protecting that young man. The legacy of St. John Bosco's vision on Marian intercession is that it restored a fundamental understanding to Christian education, that we cannot save our children and adolescents alone, that no matter how dedicated the educator, it will always be incomplete without the explicit invocation of Mary's protection. That true Christian education is always cooperation with the grace that Mary is able to channel to the young souls entrusted to her. Don Bosco's understanding of Marian intercession also led him to be particularly attentive to those students who seemed most lost, most difficult, most rebellious. He understood that often these were precisely the ones who most needed Mary's protection, those for whom Marian intercession would be most crucial and most powerful. And he often said to these students, "Mary loves you especially because you are most in danger. She will take care of you in an even more dedicated way." When Don Bosco finally died, his last concern was to ensure that his congregation would continue to practice and promote Marian devotion as he had learned in his extraordinary vision. His final instructions to his successors constantly emphasized that the Virgin Mary was, and should be, the heart of everything they did. That without the constant invocation of her intercession, all educational work would be incomplete. Don Bosco's teaching on Marian intercession remains extraordinarily relevant for modern times. We live in an era where youth are constantly assaulted by temptations through technology, through a culture that rejects Christian values, and through influences that constantly seek to lead young people astray from the path of salvation. The vision that Don Bosco received and the Marian devotion that resulted from it offers a powerful response. To invoke Mary's protection, to constantly call upon her help, to trust that she is continually working for the salvation of our children and adolescents. If you are a parent or educator, know that you are not alone in this crucial work of shaping young souls. Mary is there by your side, working continuously, offering grace, protecting those entrusted to her. Your responsibility is simply to constantly invoke her help, trust in her maternal love, and remain faithful to the transmission of faith. May St. John Bosco's vision of Marian intercession awaken in all of us a renewed understanding of the extraordinary power of the Virgin Mary. May we understand that no soul is lost while Mary is interceding. And may we dedicate our lives, particularly our educational mission, to the grace that flows through the intercession of her who is the Mother of God and the Mother of us all.